Hello, everyone, and welcome back down here to the Gamer's Den with me, your host, Jordan, your master of lore and storyteller extraordinaire. Today's going to be a short one for the DM guide. It's a topic I've referenced before, and it's certainly a topic as old as, well, as old as at least 3rd edition and older settings and various other games, and that's with some classes that just don't quite fit the overall themes or aesthetic that are brought into these different games and the base settings that they come with. Specifically in regards to Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder, I want to talk about the monk character class. Now, what I'm talking about here can easily be applied to a lot of the other classes, but monk in particular has been a fairly contentious class for again, as long as 3rd edition's been around. And the reason for that is it has more of a monastic kung fu feel to it, as opposed to the more, if such a thing exists, the more standard Western fantasy-ish kind of character classes. Fighter, rogue, cleric, bard, paladin. These things definitely have more of a Western European-ish feel to them, or at least their aesthetics do. How they're presented in the book definitely feels more Western European, while the monk feels like something out of goodness, why am I blanking on this now? I love martial arts. It feels like something you'd find at a Shaolin monastery. This disciplined, meditative figure that not only focuses their mind, but hones their body in such a way that they just move with this fluid and deadly grace. And it just clashes with that aesthetic. And in various discussion boards through the years, through, a couple of decades now, we see time and again a lot of people voice their complaints and concerns regarding the class, with several DMs outright banning the class just because it doesn't fit with that feel that they want to go for. Which, you know what? That's fine. That's absolutely fine. That's your call, your setting, your story. Do that if that just enhances the game for you. But for myself, and I know for plenty of other DMs out there, I like to try to work with the tools that I'm given. I mean, hell, I enjoy D20 Modern, and I've railed on in 2 different episodes now about how much work needs to go into that just to get things to kind of function right, or feel just a little bit different, or not be so overpowered in the case of Fast Hero. But anyways, I like to work with these different things, and specifically with the monk class, I think it's actually readily adaptable, and it takes a very minimal amount of work. I mean, for my own high fantasy steampunk setting, which has, it's steampunk, so it's a lot of Victorian era kind of elements to it, definitely in the tones of something Western European-ish, but I've also incorporated a lot of other cultures into this setting. Right now, the setting is definitely something of a Renaissance / Victorian era. England and Germany and France, it's kind of all meshed together a little bit into this wonderful cultural mishmash that I've just been having so much fun with, and so have the rest of my players. But there are other cultures at work here, and just playing with and adjusting different things has been a lot of fun, on top of just turning a lot of old tropes on their heads, like when I talked about adapting the different races with different cultures. Orcs are not necessarily evil in this setting. They can be, certainly, but the whole race is not dedicated to Groom, chaotic evil deity, just constantly on a rampage, looting and pillaging and sacking towns and burning everything. No, they've actually set up a structured, functioning society and are eagerly and actively seeking out trade partners. And that's produced a setting that is, even though it's a small difference, it's a big difference in a lot of ways. It's something different is the point, and it draws the players in. And there's no reason that you can't or should not do anything like that with the monk. And the monk is incredibly simple to do this with. For this Victorian era styled setting, I've reflavored the monks, especially for something that's a little bit more of a Western European kind of culture. they're styled more like old school pugilist, Barditsu practitioners, which if you don't know what Barditsu is, and I might be mispronouncing it, there's always that risk with me. But basically, it's what you see in the Sherlock Holmes films with Robert Downey Jr. and Jude Law. That style of fighting they use, where they take their hats and they throw them into their opponent's faces, focused on using the canes, and that old school kind of boxing kind of stance. That is the kind of stylistic overlay I put onto the monk character class. So they can still do a flurry of blows, but it's fashioned more in this old school boxing sort of thing where they jab and get that power hit in with the cross and hook punches and the like. And you can do this really easily. You can still have flurries of blows with this. You can still designate certain classes of weapons as something that is inherent to this particular variation of monk. Certainly, especially with Pathfinder, once you get into the Advanced Player's Guide, you get all these different variations using these archetypes for all of the different classes that can help them fit certain settings better. Certainly, I prefer just redoing the whole class without losing all of its abilities necessarily, maybe rethinking or retooling some of them a little bit. But I mean, shoot, how many boxing matches have we watched where the boxer just keeps getting nailed harder and harder time after time, and they just power through and keep going? Well, that could be the monk's own healing abilities, using their, in this case, not chi, but you could call it second wind or something like that. They don't necessarily have to have the tongue's ability. There's a lot of different things that you can do to make the monk fit a little bit. Just tweak some of the abilities or replace them with something else entirely. It's relatively easy to do. Just make sure it's something sort of equivalent. Certainly, especially if it's a boxer from another country, even though you might not have the same language, they might still have a certain understanding of one another just because they have that shared experience and that shared skill set that creates a certain amount of rivalry for certain, but also there's a certain bond because there's something familiar in that. There's something of yourself that you'll recognize in another person, and so you could replace what is essentially their tongue's ability with an ability to just have a fairly significant bonus with other monks or other pugilists in this case. There's a lot of different things you can do, and not every tweaking or adjustment will be perfect, and it certainly depends a lot on the setting that you're going with too. And ultimately, you may just kind of go with just that overall aesthetic difference, but leave the abilities intact. Certainly in Western fighting styles, you have Savate created in France. You have that old school pugilistic bare knuckle boxing. You have modern day Western boxing. You have Pankration, which was, if I'm remembering correctly, was developed by the Romans. You also have Greco-Roman wrestling, or just modern-day Western wrestling. There's a lot of different options that you can just apply to change the overall aesthetic of the class, to remove it from that far Eastern setting, from that Shaolin monk or that Japanese karate master, or any number of different things that you can make it step further from and fit better within the stylistic needs of your campaign setting. So try not to sell yourself short if you can, but if it's just easier overall to just ban the class, then I can't fault you for that. I'm certainly not going to. Lord knows I've had to block certain things in my own campaigns. For example, there was one setting I had where I was against bringing in gunslingers for a while, until a player convinced me otherwise, but they made a good argument for it. So, like I said, be open, be flexible, be willing to hear out your players, and consider their needs as well as the needs of your setting. Their desires, rather. It's not necessarily a need, it's a game after all, but you're playing the game with your friends. Well, unless you're doing Adventurers Club or something like that, then Maybe they're your friends, but they're people that you game with regularly, and you don't want to chase everybody away from your table. You don't want to be, don't go with Jordan. He's that asshole that just keeps blocking everything, and he's just this maniacal jerk. He just doesn't let you do anything. You don't want to develop that sort of reputation. Try to hear people out if you can help it. Anyways, I'm just kind of rambling at this point. Like I said, this part of the DM guide today is really short. I hope you enjoyed today's video, my thoughts on this here. And like I said, this can be applied to multiple different classes in multiple different game settings. Anyways, before I just keep going in loops, if you enjoyed today's video, maybe consider some of the other videos, which, since I'm learning to do the end cards thing now, I think I've tried it maybe once. Those videos will be located somewhere in this region here, and maybe consider clicking those so that way you can find more content that maybe you'll enjoy here at the Gamers Den. But with that said, I've been your host, Jordan, your master of lore and storyteller extraordinaire. You all have yourselves a good night,